welcome to a new year in the superhero battle room of War Hero to Superhero, helping military veterans and first responders transform their lives from the prayer room to the boardroom. I'm your host, Daniel Faust. We're just going to get right into it. We are in the superhero battle room with Theresa Louise Carpenter. She is a military woman who has served her country and is now pivoting to serve our community, to bring the stories of our community to the surface. So I'm going to bring her on stage as long as we have Wi-Fi. So let's press and bring her in. Hey, Theresa, do I have you?
You do. Hi, Daniel. How you doing today?
Round two of recording. That's life. So
It sure is.
we're gonna jump into it and hopefully get a seamless product, and we're gonna put a little prayer room prayer up there too. So what has inspired you to join the military?
So I am originally from Columbus, Ohio, and when I joined the Navy, I was at a pretty dark place in my childhood. I had moved out of my parents' house at the age of 17 on not so good terms. Me and my mother were, I would say, nicely putting it, butting heads. But I could also say that I wanted to kill her. And it was getting to a point where it was going to go down a road that we both knew would not go well for either one of us. And so the decision was made for me to live on my own in a house that was bought by a family who had their two daughters going to Ohio State University, and they just wanted to rent out the other rooms. So that's where I lived. It was just a few streets from my parents' house. My senior year in high school, going to an all Black inner city school where I had grown up in Catholic schools, didn't know a soul. So it was a little bit isolating. I tried my best, but because I was so rebellious, I ended up partying at the campus bars. I had a fake ID. I got drunk all the time. I did weed, and I had very promiscuous relationships. And in the process of that, I met a guy. His name was Andrew Sword, and he ended up introducing me to this idea that I needed to get my life together. And so that's the part that was really positive about that relationship. And we were off and on together for maybe up to a year, maybe a few months, if I can try to remember properly. And I had also was living just platonically with a gentleman who was in the Marine Corps Reserves. And so his name was Ryan Thornton. And so between Ryan and Andrew, I respected both of them. And so they're both strong men in their own right. And so because of that, I was convinced that I needed to get my life together and join the Navy and learn a trade and just figure out what was going on in for the rest of my life. My friends were all from Catholic school, who I still kept in touch with, a few of them. They were all going off to college, the ones that were responsible and not as crazy as I was at the time. And so they were all going off to school and getting their lives together, getting boyfriends, which of course I couldn't nail down a boyfriend because I had such bad boundaries and low standards. And so because of that, they went off to school. My partying friends, that was going nowhere. I was just getting drunk every night and feeling like crap the next day and still having to go into my dead end jobs. And so the military seemed like a good option because it would take care of the bills that were mounting, the student loan that had creeped up from a community college that I was going to. And it just seemed like it was the thing to do to try to get my life on a different path.
It's very interesting how the military goes over and does that. Now doing this as a second recording today, and we did a prior recording months ago when the internet was funky. I still can't imagine that. I'm visualizing it as you're telling me, but looking you at today, I can't see that. And it's amazing how the military can go over and transform somebody. I couldn't even imagine you even doing that. I think clipping coupons, I think budgeting, I think
No.
like delivering a great message. I don't see that stuff. I have to almost imagine you as a different person. You get like those child actors that kind of look like you. I couldn't
Mhm.
imagine like you. So it's kind of amazing on what the military has done and what you've done with your life.
Well, what's really funny with a lot of these men is that some of them could see that I was a really good person and had a good heart. So they might have been in their player jerk stage because of their own trauma. There was a few of them, like I said, like Andrew, who didn't want to have a relationship with me, but still imparted good advice and knowledge. And I've kept in touch with him a couple times back and forth as I've gotten older. And there were a few others that would fall in that category. So I think everyone could see that I was just a good person who was really lost because I felt abandoned by my mother. Was an enabler, nice man, but an enabler. And I didn't have the support growing up that I saw a lot of my friends' families have. And so I always felt like I wasn't given what I needed to thrive or to feel supported. And people could see that. And I think they had compassion for me. So even as I was doing all these things and going through these different relationships and partying at the bars and drinking and being crazy, I think ultimately I was just a lost kid that needed some direction.
And it seems the military has given you lots of direction. How long have you been in, and when do you plan to leave?
So I've been in for 28 years. I hit 29 this April, and I've submitted my intent to retire. So my last day, if this gets approved, I think that's how this process works. I've never retired before. So I put in my intent to retire for March 1st, 2026. And that was to take advantage of what we were told is the COLA trap, which is if you retire in the fall or other times of the year, your COLA for retirement is not as high. So that's why you see a lot of us retirees getting out in the springtime. So that's when I intend to retire. And I'm excited. I think it's going to be a wonderful journey and looking forward to what comes next.
Interesting. I want to expand on that cola trap. So I'm retiring in 287 days. I was actually able to check on the internet when the internet crashed. It's kind of funny. So I'm in October. So what is this cola trap you talk about? Because if I retired in the spring, what, I make more
You
money?
make more money. I don't understand it. My husband researched it. So for those of you who are financially literate, just look up cola trap military. And that's about all I can tell you. I wish I had done the homework, but I heard about it through a few other officers. And then I told my husband about it, who loves to make money and looks at ways to constantly maximize our finances. And so he verified that this was a thing with your cost of living allowance. And then even when I told people what my date of retirement was, I had people on my LinkedIn comment saying, "Yep, you avoided the cola trap. Good job. You're a smart cookie." So it's just a way to make more money with the cost of living allowance, and it's something we need to be telling our transitioning service members about, because if they don't know, they don't know, and then they retire in other times of the year, and they might be missing out on hundreds of dollars, maybe thousands. I really don't know. And if you get more information about it, send me a link, because if there was a simple way for me to learn what it means, because I tried reading up about it and it just confused me. And then I just passed it to my husband. And then he's like, yeah, there's definitely something to
All right, so I'm going to challenge your husband. I know he's not here, but he can watch the episode. I
it.
challenge him on this up level on things. So if you're retiring from active duty, I would love to see the article. But what if you're retiring from the reserve? Because the
Mhm.
reserve retirement, even though I'm retiring in October, I don't start receiving pay until June of 2040. So
Right.
you
It
guys
might not
receive
even
it right
affect
away.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I would like to know as a challenge, since he's a researcher. So I just put it on him if he has his spider senses tingling and everything else, because I'd love to know, because I can't control that. I control when I leave, but the money doesn't kick in until June of 2040. So I'm just curious if does it affect us differently, or is as reservists we don't get that cola trap? Maybe it's just an active duty, because when you get paid the month after, we don't get paid the month after. So
Yeah, that's a great question. If this is something that reservists have to think about, or a guardsman the same way that somebody on active duty would. But like I said, it was first posed to me by a potential podcast guest, and I was advised to retire in the spring. And
mhm.
then my husband did the deep dive research to figure out what exactly the month and year and down to the day, like the best day to retire. So, so once I knew that, and I trust my husband's research, because he is sort of an analysis paralysis kind of guy that will
Mhm.
just go down rabbit holes that most people would have abandoned. And so when he told me that, I was like, okay, well, that's what I'm going to propose to the Navy is when I get out. And it's a little hard because a lot of people who are in the military on active duty, they're moving in the summertime and they're PCSing during that, permanent change of station during that time. So, but I have seen so many of my colleagues get approved to PCS in the summer, and from what I have been told, it's very likely I will not get a relief at this job, and they could have civilianized the position at my job. So I was concerned that maybe they wanted to wait until the civilian came in, but then I found out that they weren't intending to use their funds to advocate for a civilian PAO. So they already have an enlisted mass communication specialist that's billeted there, and so I get the sense that they're okay with just that if and when I leave. So that made me feel like, okay, at the command level, it's going to get approved, which it has. So now I'm just waiting for the personnel office, we called it PERS, for them to approve my retirement. And so once they do that, then it's just planning for that next chapter.
That's really cool. Speaking of that, that's our next question. How will you make your transition into a transformation? Because you got a little bit of time, and it sounds like you've been planning for a little while too.
Right. Like I was saying earlier, I knew in my late 20s that this was going to be the last quote unquote 9 to 5. I do suffer from some mental health issues, complex trauma, PTSD, anxiety, ADD. I'm very sensitive to a leader who is emotionally unstable or emotionally unhealthy, especially if that leader is in a position of power and is female. And that's due to the trauma growing up with a mother who sadly was very controlling and manipulative at times, who can also be very charming and wonderful. And I still talk to her. So because of that, I knew that I was not a person that could withstand certain working environments. I'm one of those kinds of people that will speak up and speak out if I feel that people are being treated unfairly, if I feel that things are not being done in a way that is promoting good order and discipline or standards or proper leadership. Now, when I work for somebody I respect and admire and is willing to do the work and get dirty right along with us, then I have no problems. That's probably how I made it all the way to 05, is because I've had admirals and bosses who really believed in me and I was able to thrive under them. But just as I'm able to have that, I'm also sadly have worked for people that didn't deliver on good order and discipline or standards and played favorites and played politics. So because of that, I knew that once the Navy was done, I didn't want to ever put myself in a position where my mental health could be compromised by a destructive boss or a unhealthy working environment. So because of that, I knew that there would have to be a plan in place so that I would never have to work again. And that's what I started working on in my late 20s. Even before I met my husband, I just saved and saved and saved, lived off half my income for years. And now I'm at a place where I just look forward to podcasting, to writing a book. I'm in touch with a publisher at this moment about what we're going to do as a book idea. I've thought about becoming a private investigator. That's just one of the latest things I was thinking about doing with my GI Bill that I had to yank back from my husband so that I could retire. So I'm just looking forward to what's ahead. I love to research and I love to kind of dig into details. You'll see on my LinkedIn page, sometimes I go down rabbit holes with current news, current events, because I think it's really important for us to be informed citizens and to understand the issues that are impacting our community, whether that be in the military world, whether it be in the animal advocacy world. I've done a lot of work in that arena. So I look forward to just deepening into my ability to research and to suss out truth. I've been called a truth teller, which really makes me proud. You're muted, Daniel.
Sorry about that. So
No
that
worries.
was very interesting and everything else. We're going to go hit a quick sponsor break and dive more into that in a moment. You have served. No matter if it was in the military or civilian service, you deserve to live good. Live good in health. Live good in wealth. Live good in so much more. At Live Good, the global wholesale buyer club, we empower you to take your mission to the next level. Are you ready to live good? We all struggle in life. No matter the barriers, we do not need to stay there. Each day is an opportunity to step into better health. Each day is an opportunity to step into wealth. Each day is an opportunity to step into dreams. Live Good, the Global Wholesale Buyers Club, empowers all these steps and more. Ready to be empowered? Grab the link to learn more. Welcome back to War Hero to Superhero. If you want to feel empowered getting your message out there, we still have 4 spots for our sponsors. So if you want to get on our episodes, we averagely broadcast between 2 to 3 episodes a week. So you will get reach immensely. So get back with us later. We're going to bring back Theresa sharing her inspiring story about making her transformation into multiple roles and be able to never be a 9 to 5 again, which is my personal dream. So Theresa, so before we went to that quick sponsor break, we were talking about your inspiring dreams, but what made you start serving your current community? Because you know what you've been wanting to do for a long time, to break to 9 to 5. Well, what made you currently serve who you're serving today?
That's true. Because I started this journey in 2008 or 2009 by joining Boxer Club of Hawaii, actually. And so I had a boxer dog because of my ex-husband. He loved boxers, and I still have a boxer today. So I fell in love with the breed long after the marriage ended. And I knew when I was a part of that cause that there was something strange about people who were showing dogs and breeding dogs, but didn't want any regulation on dogs. And I thought, well, wouldn't you, if you cared so much about these dogs, wouldn't you want to ensure that bad breeders were held accountable? And wouldn't you want the United States Department of Agriculture on the large scale breeding facilities? Wouldn't you want them to inspect? And what I realized is that sadly, a lot of times people in the dog show world were more concerned about ribbons and titles and things like that than they were about keeping their dogs safe. And I saw such a divide there. So I ended up partnering with a lobbyist in Hawaii. Her name was Inga Gibson, and she's one of my early podcast guests. And she taught me all about advocacy. She taught me about petitioning the government, which I had never thought that that was something I could do. So we went to the Capitol in Honolulu, and we would go around and talk to legislators and staffers. And I just loved it. I was like, oh, I was so idealistic back then. And I really thought that, like, if you brought a fact sheet to a legislator, you would maybe make an impact on a bill. And she was very persuasive and very good at what she did. She went to a lot of fundraisers. She was very, very charming and funny and just amazing lady. Still friends with her to this day. And I learned what you had to do in order to be persuasive and to get a message out there. So I started a Facebook group called Hawaii Military Pets. And it was just this wonderful way for me to feel like I was making an impact and giving back, because currently at the time I was a very junior public affairs officer. And I definitely felt like there wasn't much I was being given. Like I wasn't even allowed to do media queries half the time without being micromanaged. And so I felt like, wow, this is a place where I can really make a difference and give back. And so every now and again, I would do something at work that would be fulfilling, but this really sustained me. And so that was where my love of advocacy got started. And so I'm just taking the stuff that I learned in animal advocacy now and applying it to the military community, because it's no different. Advocacy is advocacy. And as a change agent, you just have to learn how to navigate those policies and those rules. And that's the hardest part for any advocate. And you have to be credible, and you have to be willing to admit when you're wrong. There's a lot of people that won't do that. So it's been a wonderful journey, and I continue to do it this day. And now I'm just doing it more for the military than I am for animals.
That's amazing. That's amazing how one small part of your life is now becoming a bigger part of your life, and you'll be able to take that in a full-time capacity very much soon. So we're going to go over and put our hands in prayer. And if you need crossy fingers too, we'll go over and do both and hope that March of 2026, so your COLA is the maximum in there. And
Yes.
but we'll go over and get into other parts. So our second to last question is this: is like, so you're about to go over and transition out, and then make that transformation and everything else. What have you found is your secret fuel when the pressure and tough times come? Because you can be a non 9 to 5er, and that's still going to go over and happen. So, what is in your bag of tricks is that secret fuel?
I think it's to always have a reason to get up every morning because unfortunately, there are people who are bored and directionless. And I think that you have to feel like there's something out there that gives you a reason to keep going. Even when I went through like my worst breakups, I was doing puppy mill protests at the time at the National City Mall. And every Saturday and Sunday morning, we would set up a table and we would talk to people. And I can remember being so lonely and having nobody. But man, I had my cause and I had wonderful ladies around me that were also involved in this cause. And it really kept me going because it kept me focused on a mission that was greater than myself, which I know to your audience is going to sound funny that I didn't have the military as my mission that was greater than myself. And there were times, don't get me wrong, I've been a public affairs officer for uh, 10, 15 years since 2008. And I've had some amazing exercises that I've been a part of. I've been a part of some really great teams, but I almost consider like the military, I compare it to like a sadly a destructive or a toxic relationship where sometimes it's going great and it's really, really good. But then other times, half the time, probably, it was very hard. And it was very challenging to be in these environments where there was so much politics and games. And I was always anxious and wondering if I was going to make the next rank, what my fit rep was going to look like. So these other activities and advocacy and getting my accreditation in public relations or getting 2 master's degrees, all those things kind of kept me going and allowed me to really do things that I could own and really say something about the things that I wanted to accomplish. And in that process, I think I found my calling and I found what I was meant to do.
I think that's amazing that your secret fuel became your calling at the same time. And I do agree. I don't think our audience is going to go over and say, like, oh, the military is like a dog eat dog world sometimes and really tight knit and then really fight. And I think sometimes the MOSs or the rates or AFSCs, whatever you call it, in each of the branches and everything else, it depends on that camaraderie. So the civilian world is used to Green Berets and then reading those really high end books. And
And the
I have
Navy
friends
SEALs. Yeah.
and I have friends in that world, but I have more friends in the day-to-day grind. I'm like, I'm education and training, you're public affairs. We're kind of a small cadre of team, but we're kind of by ourselves. And then when we don't know how to work together, like when we come together, like I know when my career field started to merge and they're starting to do this more like this cell type work and have a bunch of us work together and they're trying to bring it at the staff level, they don't realize like how much there is in that particular regard because we weren't taught and our lives are not on the line. It's like it's that Excel formula that they did wrong or you miscalculated this or someone going over and sending an email and not even saying like, hey, happy new year, merry Christmas, and then to them in there. We're kind of office politicky, so I could see sometimes we're this and sometimes that we're this. So I totally agree with that. So
Yeah,
as
and Daniel, I just want to add to that because you brought up such an amazing point when it comes to the fact that a lot of the jobs in the military are not the Navy SEALs, they're not the Green Berets, they're not infantry. I get those are the hardest jobs in the Navy or the military, but that's not what the majority of us in the military do. The majority of us in the military, we're just grinding it out every day in jobs that are sometimes so emotionally draining. And I think that there isn't enough people who will come out and say that because we've got this image to protect and we've got this idea that everybody has to love their job and think it's wonderful all the time. And that's not realistic. And that's not the picture that is properly conveyed to the public. The jobs that I thrived the most were the ones where the leadership was so transparent and so authentic and so honest. And a person that comes to mind is Admiral Brad Cooper. He was my commanding officer on USS Russell, and I'll never forget his transformational leadership. Admiral Bill Byrne is another who comes to mind. He would make mistakes, he would admit his mistakes, he was authentic, he was motivated, he was transformational, and he was a visionary, and so is Admiral Brad Cooper. In fact, he's still serving, and those are the ones I love. But sadly, I do think we have a dearth of leaders that will really stand up and stick their necks out when the time comes.
And with that, what do you think you have learned as your 3 superhero tactics to finish the show? What do you think that you have learned that you'll take out from the military that you'll bring into your next mission?
So, number one is, as a leader, set the example. Be the person that your people want to be one day. And the only way that you do that is by being able to show them that you're willing to get dirty and do the work. They are not going to respect you or want to work for you if they never see you, quote unquote, do the things. So, first and foremost, set the example. Number two, have a vision. Always think to yourself, what is the strategic end game of where I want to end up with the things that I'm doing? And this can change at any time. It doesn't have to be set in stone, but have a thought or a vision, convey that vision to your people, and try your best to work towards it. And then be flexible that when new information comes in, or another priority has to take precedence, be able to explain to your people why that's no longer the vision or the strategic intent. That's one of the reasons why I believe the military fails, is that we don't properly convey what our vision is. We don't admit our mistakes. That's like number three, be transparent. So don't sugarcoat bad things that happen. Tell people the truth about why those things happened. Tell them how you're going to ensure that those things never happen again. And then live in that truth and let people hold you accountable. Because when you do that, when you hold yourself accountable, you're showing your people that you're going to do the same thing for them.
And Theresa, I want to thank you for being transparent, being vulnerable, dealing with our mistakes on the
No, it's
glitches and
all
everything
good.
else. And we're going to give you the floor one more time to close it out, and then we're going to go to cred. So thank you for joining us and being our guest.
Awesome. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for taking the opportunity to have me on. If you guys are interested in checking out my work, I do have a podcast called Stories of Service, Ordinary People Who Do Extraordinary Work. And that airs every Thursday live on my LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube channel at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. I'm also bringing on as needed or as they come up, a friends, family, and returning guest bonus episode on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. My first one, I think, is at the end of this January, but I am active mostly on LinkedIn, but also on Instagram and Facebook. So please leave a comment, check out my shows. I'm also on Wreaths of America every Friday at 9 EST on their Sirius satellite radio, as well as I am a Parade Deck creator, using the Parade Deck as my method of uploading blogs after every episode. So thank you, Daniel, for the opportunity to share.